The War Room Show here on Infowars.com, and I'm your co-host, Roger Stone, along with my Sancho Panza, Owen Schroyer. Big doings today in New York. George W. Bush viciously attacked President Donald Trump in a speech, incredibly attacking the president on the immigration and the trade issue. Saying that we have forgotten the great tradition of immigration. The point, of course, is that it was a porous U.S. borders that allowed a number of Saudi citizens to attack the United States on 9/11. We know, of course, that a number of the hijackers from that day trained right here in the Sarasota area. Governor Jeb Bush was notified of their strange activities, but no one bothered to tell our intelligence agencies in Washington, or if they did, they took no note. Incredible that the Bushes, of all people, having cratered the U.S. economy, having put us at risk on 9/11, and then have pushed the entire NAFTA international trade deal, where they were major cheerleaders, along with their usual charitable crime syndicate partners, the Clintons, to suck all of the jobs out of America. Now comes Donald Trump, who seeks to seal our borders, set up a reasonable immigration system so that we can examine the applications of those who want to come here for the promise of America, wants to renegotiate these one-sided Bush-pushed trade agreements to bring the jobs back to the United States of America. He has to sustain this attack from the deep state puppet, George W. Bush. Now, when the deep state has to trot out somebody whose credibility is as scorched as George W., you know they're in deep, deep trouble. If you don't know the facts on the Bush crime family, you can get that at InfoWars, where my book, The Bush Crime Family, now available in paperback, charts the entire history of the Bushes from grandfather Prescott Bush's making the family fortune by financing the Nazi war machine. There's the forerunner, Jeb and the Bush crime family, co-written with my longtime colleague, St. John Hunt. St. John, by the way, tells me that among the JFK classified documents that we expect to be released here on October 26th, President Donald J. Trump willing, are the secret diaries of his father, E. Howard Hunt, well-known, legendary CIA operative, and of course one of the Watergate burglars, who on his deathbed confessed to being on the ground in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963, confirmed it was at least partially a CIA operation, and of course that Lyndon Baines Johnson was, as he put it, running the show. In any event, the attack on the president by George W. included more cheerleading about the horrible Russian threat to subvert our democracy. So they didn't just attack President Trump, they also sought to prop up their failing Russian narrative. The ex-president said, according to our intelligence services, the Russian government has made a project of turning Americans against each other. This effort is broad, systematic, and stealthy. It's conducted on a range of social media platforms. Based on what I've seen, former President Bush, their effort has been limited, ham-handed, and relatively incompetent. I don't know who wrote these Facebook ads, but they were almost incomprehensible. Now, yesterday, the Washington Post contacted me because at some point in the campaign, an image of President Donald Trump wearing a Stetson cowboy hat caught my eye. And I recalled that in 1963, November 22nd to be exact, on his fateful way to Dallas, President John F. Kennedy was presented with a 10-gallon Stetson in Fort Worth. And he declined to put it on, saying he would take it back to the White House and that the Texans could see him wearing it when they visited in a few weeks. A gracious way of saying, I'm not putting that hat on. Ronald Reagan, as a president, looked great in a cowboy hat, and so did Donald Trump, and I retweeted the picture. Little did I know that the Tennessee Republican based source of this document was evidently, in fact, some kind of oblique Russian disinformation site, but there was no copy. There was merely a photo of a very handsome Donald Trump wearing a cowboy hat, and I tweeted something like, Donald Trump does what JFK refused to do, and the link. Quite innocent. But it was a Russian image that we recycled and retweeted, which proves, Washington Post, exactly what? I would say it proves nothing. So they've rolled George W. Bush off that talks about foreign aggression, disinformation, and so on. This guy is CIA start to finish. The 9/11 Commission bent over backwards not to expose the role of the Saudis. Thanks to Senator Bob Graham of Florida, the super secret congressional report that showed that members of the Saudi royal family had financed the hijackers while in this country was finally made public. Some of you may remember the yellow cake uranium intelligence reports and the phony weapons of mass destruction that George W. and his advisors used to walk us into a endless-seeming foreign war that cost America hundreds of millions of dollars and many lives. So let's see. They crashed the economy. They walked us into a phony war. They gave us trade policies that destroyed our job market, and they had a porous immigration system that allowed 9 Saudis to enter the country and attack us on 9/11. Good job, George W. I don't think you ought to be criticizing President Donald Trump. I do want to mention to you that we, as always, want to remind you that we have no multi-billionaire benefactor standing in the wings. We don't have a George Soros or a David Rockefeller or even the Koch brothers to write giant $100 million checks to us here at InfoWars. We have to depend on you, the individual info warrior, to support us with your dollars, and that's why we're very proud to bring you the very best pre-tested, carefully selected products. Yes, we've got T-shirts and books and other First Amendment paraphernalia, but really the real value, the stuff that I love the most, are the all-natural supplements that you can find at the Infowars.com store. Now, I really think Alex Jones may have gone out of his mind with these discounts: 50% off Anthroplex, 30% off of Super Male Vitality. These two products used in conjunction create a synergy that is optimal for male, shall we say, plumbing health and vitality. So I highly recommend these two products. In all honesty, at these prices, they will not be around long. So you can help yourself and help us here. And frankly, you can kick George Soros right in the groin by going now to the Infowars.com store and taking advantage of these extraordinary specials. I'm Roger Stone, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and you're here at the War Room at Infowars.com. Joining me now, 2 extraordinary activists, Michael Bowen and Stephanie Scruggs Bowen, both of the Coalition for a Strong America.com. You can check out their site. And we're here to discuss the opioid crisis in America and what can be done about it. Michael has a personal story, a journey that he can tell us about, and Stephanie has done extraordinary research into not only the opioid crisis, but the benefits of medicinal marijuana, which, of course, I am an outspoken advocate for. So welcome to the War Room, Michael and Stephanie.
Thank you for having us.
So, Michael, let's start with you, because you've had an extraordinary personal experience that I think it would be valuable to share for our info warriors.
Sure. I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 13 and had been a lifelong sufferer, excuse me, that was controlled mostly by big pharma drugs until approximately 2 years ago when it became intractable. My wife actually did all the research and convinced me. I was very reluctant, but she convinced me to try medical marijuana, which I did. And over the time, it has proven to be completely effective in controlling my seizures.
At the time, as often happens with barbiturates, which is typically what's used to treat epileptic patients, at the time, his barbiturates were starting to wear off. There's a life cycle, just like with pain medications, where the effectiveness of the medication stops working. And Mike was starting to have breakthrough seizures, even on his medicine, and then we got to the point where it didn't work at all, and he was having 1 to 3 seizures every single night. So to put that into context, if you've never had a seizure before, it's a lot like running the Ironman every single time you have it, all in about 3 minutes. So for your typical epileptic, once you have one, if you don't stroke out, if you don't have a heart attack, and about 5,000 people every month, every year,
56,000 people a year
die from those. And if you're lucky enough to survive your seizure, you wind up with 3 to 5 days, the older you get, of being completely laid out and exhausted because you've just worked every teensy-tiny muscle in your entire body. So when we started using medical marijuana, we played around with a lot of different CBD treatments, and CBD has no THC in it, so you're not going to get stoned. There's no high effect. There's nothing to it that's going to cause, kind of hippie syndrome or anything like that. We played with a lot of different kinds, about 24 different kinds. We finally found one, Warfighter Hemp, that works. It's all organic, and Mike went from having 3 seizures a night to having none. It's been a miraculous process for us.
That's really extraordinary. Now, you have found it obviously to be a beneficial substitute for the opioids, and you make a very compelling case about why medical marijuana is an answer to our current opioid crisis.
Absolutely. So what has been found in states that have legalized medical marijuana, what they have seen is that the average doctor is writing fewer opiate prescriptions every year, to the tune of
1,839 for the average doctor, 1,839 fewer opiate prescriptions.
That's every doctor. That's really significant in fighting the opiate crisis. But in addition, there's huge cost savings to the taxpayer as well. So in 2014, there was a study that they did that they showed that just reducing, and it was an automatic reduction, it wasn't anything the government pushed, but just the fact that people switched from opiates to medical marijuana in 20 states saved $483 million just in 2014 alone. Now, if we were to take that and extrapolate it out to all 50 states, we would be saving over $1 billion a year in Medicaid just on opiate prescriptions. But then when you take a look at all of the other illnesses that medical marijuana treats, I expect you'll see multiple billion-dollar savings. And this is why Big Pharma is fighting medical marijuana legalization so hard. We're not here to advocate recreational marijuana or anything like that. We just want a medicine that's as affordable and far more effective than anything that Big Pharma is putting out right now. But Big Pharma is $100 billion industry. In fact, if you look at it worldwide, it's multiple $1 trillion. And they're terrified that this plant that people can grow in their backyard will cut out the major source of their income, opiates.
Now, you also made a very interesting case to me at lunch today about why medicinal marijuana is at least partially the answer to probably one of our biggest current crises in this country, and that is the health care of our veterans. This is something I know the president feels very deeply about. And I think it may be one of the most important reasons why it's vital at this point to protect the access to cannabis that's being used largely for medicinal purposes in the 29 states that have legalized it. I come to this from a states' rights point of view. I never smoked marijuana in high school. I never smoked it even in college. It was not until I saw the actual medical benefits to both my grandfather and my father, both of whom died of horrifically of cancer, and I saw that the OxyContin that they were trying to feed them was doing more harm than good. They lost their appetite. My grandfather weighed under 100 pounds. He weighed about 98 pounds when we finally obtained some marijuana, which seemed to bring back his appetite and made his dying years a bit more comfortable, helped alleviate the pain. So talk to us about marijuana within the realm of treating PTSD, why we have so much more of this post-battle trauma than we've had in the past.
So the interesting thing is the nature of war has changed, right, from our previous wars. Our soldiers are far more likely to get their bell rung, as they call it in the service. In other words, minor concussions, right? Well, the problem is when you get a minor concussion, you can recover from that in about a week or two. But if you have another minor concussion on top of that, you might as well have been hit by a car. It causes a massive concussion. Now, because of IEDs, because we use C4, because we have guys known as door kickers, and they're constantly exposed to small blasts, right? That shakes the brain and creates a concussion. So you're creating brain injuries, and the longer these guys go without treatment, and most of them won't tell anybody, they'll just say, oh, I just got my bell rung, and they get back up to work, their brains don't have the opportunity to recover. So what happens is they wind up in a shorter amount of time being just like the guys in the NFL who have repeated concussions every single Sunday and every single practice. So what we're finding now is we have vets from the sandbox coming back with exponential rates of epilepsy, exponential rates of developing Parkinson's. There's some evidence that and reason to believe that they, just like the football players, are developing CTE.
Stephanie, hold that thought for us. We're going to be right back for more discussion of how maybe getting the veterans together with the NFL veterans can provide the public momentum we need to keep marijuana, cannabis legal in the 29 states where it's currently legal. I'm Roger Stone. You're at the War Room, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm your host, Roger Stone, and we are joined by Michael Bowen and Stephanie Scruggs Bowen. Michael is the Chief Executive Officer, and Stephanie serves as the Chief Operating Officer for the Coalition for a Strong America.com. This is one of the most effective organizations in the fight to protect our access and the access of millions to legal cannabis in the 29 states that have chosen to legal it, and hopefully someday all 50 states. We hope to persuade Attorney General Jeff Sessions to honor the president's pledge when he was running for president. You remember the president said he's not a supporter of marijuana, he's a supporter of states' rights. Let the people decide. If the people decide they want medicinal marijuana, well, then the people shall have it. That's the Donald Trump I know and love. We were talking about the use of cannabis to treat PTSD among our veterans, about the commonality of the injuries they are sustaining to some of our professional football players. Why don't you pick it up there, Stephanie?
So the important thing to understand here is that medical marijuana is incredibly useful for the treatment of PTSD. See, the federal government even knows this, and I wish Jeff Sessions would check out patent number 6,630,507. In fact, you can go look it up yourself. In 1999, the Department of Health, the United States government, the Department of Health, patented medical marijuana because, and I'm quoting, for its use as a neuroregenerator and a neuroprotectant. A neuroregenerator means it can regenerate, literally regenerate your nervous system. So they found, and they proved it in their patent, they found that it is effective in treating Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, in HIV, in arthritis, and in PTSD. In fact, the Israeli government now actively prescribes cannabis to its soldiers for the treatment of PTSD and has been doing so for years. But our government knows this, and it's known it since 1999. Again, it's Big Pharma keeping something affordable out of the hands that need it. And my husband here, because he was on barbiturates for so long, barbiturates deteriorate your nerves. Think of like an electrical cord on a lamp, right? Your nerves have a coating just like that electrical cord does. And if you take that coating off, you get all kinds of sparks going out. Well, your nerves work the same way. And unfortunately, for long-term use of barbiturates and most other epilepsy medications, the same thing happens to the nerves. It's called neurodegeneration. And we've had great success in alleviating Michael's pain by using medical marijuana, which is actively regenerating those nerves in his nervous system for him.
This is fascinating. Michael, I know that you have been, along with Stephanie, in the forefront on Capitol Hill to protect illegal marijuana.
Yes.
As you know, the House Rules Committee recently denied us the opportunity to attach the rider that has been on every budget since 2014 that would prevent the Justice Department from using federal funds to crack down on state legalized marijuana. Where do you see this fight going?
Well, it's a very significant fight in that that effort in and of itself was a step backwards in us legitimatizing this as medicine. And again, going back to the actual patent that the U.S. government has, they like to talk about the fact that there's no evidence and there's no research in those studies, yet in their own patent they cite about 40 studies. So there is a significant coalition on Capitol Hill within the House as far as protecting our rights. We have more work to do in the Senate, for sure, and definitely with Jeff Sessions. So, but I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to reschedule this from Class 1 to Class 3. I don't think it's going to happen in a year or two. I think it's probably going to happen in maybe 3 or 4 years. Once we do that, it takes care of all the other issues. It takes care of the banking issues. It takes care of the VA issues and VA policy. You know, if you're a veteran now and you get caught with this in your system, you lose all your benefits, which is crazy. You look at my friends.
It's absurd. So in other words, if you're caught with effective medicine in your bloodstream,
right,
they cut off your benefits to go buy ineffective, harmful medicines.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Not only that, but they're prescribing the opiates. So, you know, my friend Boone Cutler, who's a war vet, combat vet, he was on a couple dozen different pills before he discovered cannabis. So not only do they not want to keep this very healthy option open for our vets, they want to prescribe poison to us.
You know, and the other interesting thing is, and Trey Gowdy made some great points about this in the House not very long ago, marijuana is currently scheduled as Schedule 1. Do you know that cocaine and heroin have a lower safety rating? They're considered more safe than marijuana is.
It's Kafkaesque.
It's ridiculous.
It's true Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Only the federal government could tell you in one breath, this has no medicinal value. Oh, by the way, we hold the patent on synthetic THC because it has all these medicinal values. I'm reading from their abstract application. They say that it is useful in age-related, inflammatory, and autoimmune diseases. They say it is useful in limiting neurological damage, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, HIV, dementia. In their own application, they admit that it has value in the treatment of these conditions, yes, and in the next breath, they tell you it has no value. My friend Congressman Matt Gaetz, a true hero on this issue, he complains about the fact that when he tries to move pro-cannabis legislation, they say, well, there isn't enough research. And then when he tries to move funding to get better research, they say, well, we can't find the way to finance that research. So it's catch-22. We can't get legalization because we have enough research, and we can't get enough research because it's not legal. Absurd. The Israelis really are the world's leaders in terms of their cannabis benefit and harm research. And as you point out, they are now legally using it for their soldiers. Amazing.
Also
Absolutely
for cancer,
amazing.
too. And another important thing to note, the United States federal government has been funding Israeli marijuana research for the last 50 years on an average of $100,000 a year. On an average across those 50. Some years have been more, some years have been less. So they know that the research is there. They're funding the research. Over 100 different studies have proven that cannabis helps cancer, and in many forms of cancer, not just alleviates the symptoms, but kills the cancer cells. And this is research that the government's paying for. They just won't allow it to happen here. They'd rather it happen over in Israel. Apparently, maybe Israel has a less strong big pharma lobby.
Extraordinary. I want to thank Michael Bowen, Stephanie Scruggs-Bowen for joining us today. We're going to have them back. They are true leaders in the fight to protect medicinal marijuana, and in the future, we hope to legalize it. We certainly hope to reschedule it so that doctors who believe their patients can benefit can legally prescribe it. But while you're with me, I want to remind you yet again that this kind of terrific programming is not free, and we need you to go to the Infowars.com store now. Now, you've heard me talk about my favorite product. That would be Brain Force. When I find that I've been up all night writing, and I have get very little done during the day because the phone is pardon me, the phone is constantly ringing, and therefore I have to stay up late at night to write my stuff. The next day you can be a little foggy. I find that Brain Force brings me a mental clarity, a mental energy, ability to kind of sort through the tasks ahead, and I highly recommend it. But at 50% off, I can really recommend it. Brain Force, without any question, my favorite product at the InfoWars store. And when you buy at the InfoWars store, you help pay for the expansion of InfoWars, including the new programming here at the War Room. So help yourself, help us, help the revolution. Go to the store now. Thanks again to Michael and Stephanie.
Thanks,
I'm at the War Room, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're at the War Room with Roger Stone and my colleague Owen Schroyer. Owen is doing an able job of holding down the anchor chair here at the War Room, and we find our audience growing and reaction to every day's programming getting better and better by the day. We are part of the expansion that Alex Jones has been planned for some time and is now executing almost 10 hours of live programming every day. Owen, how do you see the state of the world today?
Well, Roger, there's some stories that are not shocking to me. We know that the Democrat Party is collapsing and corroding right in front of our face, as well as everything that they've tried to wage against Trump with their fake news. So I wanted to bring up a couple of stories here and get your opinion on them. First, this is a story out of the Daily Caller. Fusion GPS partners plead the fifth during House Intel appearance. Two of the co-founders of Fusion GPS, Peter Frisch and Thomas Catan, pled the fifth to every question asked of them while they were in a meeting with House Intelligence Committee on Wednesday. And these, of course, are the opposition research firm Fusion GPS behind the infamous Trump dossier. But I'm just curious, Roger, when you were put in front of a committee and questioned, you didn't plead the fifth, did you?
No, and in all honesty, I did have to consider it. It was an option laid out by my lawyers, particularly on the narrow question of the source who confirmed the Julian Assange speech and tweet of June 21st, in which he openly said that he had emails that belonged to Hillary Clinton and he would publish them. But I answered all of their questions honestly and truthfully. And of course, I vehemently denied any collusion, coordination, or conspiracy with the Russian states or any Russians or anyone representing the Russians or anyone fronting for the Russians or anyone named Igor or Boris. But the entire question surrounding this phony dossier which seeks to implicate President Donald Trump in sexual shenanigans with prostitutes who supposedly urinated on a bed in a five-star hotel, dubbed by Alex Jones as Pee-Pee Gate, continues to boggle the mind, because our tax dollars, our FBI, at the direction of Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, paid $50,000 for this fraudulent, forged document. And of course, John McCain arranged for the document to be brought to the United States and given to our FBI, who presumably then ponied up $50K of our tax dollars to pay for it. Frankly, Senator McCain's role in this should be investigated by the Senate Ethics Committee. It would be nice if some member of the U.S. Senate, the only ones who have standing to file a complaint before that body, would have the gumption to do so. Republican or Democrat, John McCain's role in this is very much suspect, in my opinion.
So the Trump haters and those that attack Trump can't answer questions, and then the people on Trump's side answer every question. Shocking. Imagine my shock to that. Now, here's a story, Roger. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. Shakeup at the DNC, Democrat National Committee, longtime officials ousted. Shakeup's underway. Several key longtime officials have lost their post. The ousters come ahead of the DNC's first meeting since Perez, that's the potty mouth Tom Perez, took over as the chairman with a pledge to unite the party after the Sanders-Clinton campaign divided it. Complaints are already beginning after they saw Perez's list of appointments, which is overwhelmingly Clinton-backed members. Some of these names are Ray Buckley, James Zogby, Alice Gurmand, Barbara Kaspar, Sipperstein. I'm not sure if any of those names are important or if you're familiar with any of that, but what do you make of the DNC trying to shake things up right now? Just another act of desperation?
What this is, Owen, is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The Democratic Party is a pale imitation of what it once was under presidents like John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman. This was an anti-communist party that stood for national defense, but also stood for the working people. The Democratic Party today is left in a pool of identity politics and small but loud interest groups that control it, completely cut off from the concerns or attitudes or values of average working Americans. So I wish Mr. Perez well, but the problem here is that most of the Democrats I know, and I know many of them, and I am friendly with a number of professional Democrats, just want Bill and Hillary and their greedy, rapacious little daughter to disappear. Take your ill-gotten millions, the hundreds of millions that you have lined your pockets with, and ride off into the sunset and hope that Jeff Sessions and his investigators are not following you, which of course they should be. How long will the Clintons destroy the prospects of the Republican Party? From the point of view of a partisan, Hillary, please run again. Please run again. My book, The Clintons' War on Women, will be out in a nanosecond with new chapters about your phony Russian narrative and how we now know, things I didn't know when I wrote the book, how you and Bill were getting millions from the Russians in turn for turning over 20% of our strategic uranium. And more importantly, how the Obama administration knew about massive corruption, payoffs, bribery in this effort, but did nothing about it. Yes, there was a presidential candidate in bed with the Russians. Yes, there was a presidential candidate nominated by one of the two major parties whose aides were making millions off of the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, that candidate was Hillary Rodham Clinton. So I think the Democratic Party has a death wish. They keep Nancy Pelosi. They keep Hillary Clinton. In all honesty, the only fellow they have who, while I don't love him, I admit he's a shrewd pal, and that is their Senator Chuck Schumer. Now, he's one of my least favorite Democrats, but at least he seems to know what he is doing. And even he would probably tell you privately that a party without the Clintons stands to be a much more successful political party.
And, of course, Putin comes out, the stories on Infowars.com, saying exactly what you're talking about. It was Hillary Clinton the whole time behind the Russian collusion, phony fake news narrative just to disrespect Trump and his voters. Roger, we've got 2.5 minutes left here. You're going to do double time today as I've got to step out. So I want to, there's a wand, nice. I want to take things a different direction and talk a little fashion with you today. Did you happen to see President Trump's tie today?
I confess that I did not. I was so tied up with the preparation for the 2-hour block of the War Room that I'm going to enjoy today that I must have missed that. Can we cut to a photo of it? Let's see.
Yeah, we'll see if the crew can pull up a photo. Guys, it was when he was meeting with the mayor from Puerto Rico today. Or I don't know, mayor or governor. I'm sorry, I forget. But, Roger, I noticed something. Now, a man like you, I'll even admit myself, we think about what we wear, and sometimes there's some things behind it, if you will. There's a reason why we choose the colors or what have you. And President Trump is someone who always wears usually a plain colored tie or a power tie with stripes on it. Today, he was wearing a gradient style tie with blue going to red that kind of appeared purple. I've never seen the president, I've never seen Donald Trump wear a tie like this before. Have you? I don't know. Something seems, why do you think he was wearing this tie? I don't know.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that Donald Trump is the man who essentially founded the red power tie of the 1980s. He was the first one to wear that, and it became a standard on Wall Street and in the New York business and ultimately world business community. Trump is a man who is fastidious about his tailoring. Until recently, he was, as I understand it, buying at Brioni, an Italian make. Now I understand that that he is having his clothes made in this country, I believe, by a tailor in Tennessee called Chadwick, I believe it is, and he is fastidious about his appearance. So if the president is breaking out sartorially with a more interesting tie, I must say it's still tasteful. It's still somber. It still fits within that kind of solid color meme that he favors. Now,
I'm just hoping everything's okay, because the weird tie, I was just wondering. All right, hey, Roger Stone doing double time today. He takes over the War Room. Don't go anywhere.
To fear the world we have organized and led the 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope of Earth for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems. Is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history.
Wrestling with being shoveled onto the ash heap of history, Arizona Senator John McCain, his vote on the Senate floor, bought and paid for by the military-industrial complex and the Soros machine, revealed his true disdain for the American people while ironically being awarded a medal for protecting liberty in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1991, McCain was appointed as chairman of the Senate Select Committee on POW/MIA Affairs due to the fact that internal Pentagon whistleblowers had been complaining for years that significant information was being withheld regarding the POWs. McCain would use this committee to cover up the truth all the way until today, following a pattern constructed by the White House since old Tricky Dick Nixon took office. Yet McCain is accepting contributions, i.e. thinly disguised bribes that constitute a major conflict of interest for the McCain Institute from the very machine that is subverting the interests of the United States. The Daily Caller reported the Institute has accepted contributions of as much as $100,000 from billionaire liberal activist funder George Soros, and from Teneo, a for-profit company co-founded by Doug Band, former President Bill Clinton's bagman. Teneo has long helped enrich Clinton through lucrative speaking and business deals. And Bloomberg reported in 2016 on $1 million Saudi Arabian donation to the institute, a contribution the McCain Group has refused to explain publicly. In addition, the institute has taken at least $100,000 from a Moroccan state-run company tied to repeated charges of worker abuse and exploitation, along with $100,000 from the Pivotal Foundation, a private equity and real estate firm. The Pivotal Foundation has in the last 3 years given $205,000 to the National Iranian American Council, which has been a vocal advocate for the Iranian nuclear deal the Obama administration negotiated.
Just a quick question. Has your relationship with the president raised to the point that you are not going to support anything that he comes to you and asks?
Why would you say something that stupid? Why would you ask something that dumb? Huh? My job as a United States Senator is a senator from Arizona, which I was just reelected to. You mean that I am somehow going to behave in a way that I'm going to block everything because of some personal disagreement? That's a dumb question.
McCain, suffering from brain cancer, would rather go down with the New World Order ship rather than right the damage he has already done, serving himself rather than his country. John Bound reporting for Infowars.com.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Roger Stone. Let me correct a misstatement in the first block when I made reference to President Donald Trump, who has traditionally had his clothing made by Brioni. I mispronounced or misidentified the very fine maker of American clothes, Hardwick Clothes of Cleveland, Tennessee, who have graciously offered to dress our president with a fine garment made entirely in the USA. I apologize for that misstatement, and I salute to my friends at Hardwick. Joining me now, Jack Posobiec, known in the movement as Jumping Jack Flash with Rebel Media, a man with unparalleled sources in and around Washington, well connected to the Trump administration, and very much on top of the latest developments in the United States regarding the cover-up by the Obama Justice Department as it pertained to a bribery and influence peddling operation by the Russian state to grab control of 20% of our strategic uranium. By now you know that Bill Clinton pocketed $500,000, and the Clinton crime syndicate front, the Clinton Foundation, pocketed $145 million from this criminal enterprise. Jack, what is your latest and what's your analysis?
Roger, this is actually going to be picking up some traction now that finally that Chuck Grassley, the Republican on the Judiciary Committee, has announced that there will be hearings on this. Now, we have also covered the hearings that the Senate has been having on the quote-unquote Russian collusion investigation so far, but to this point, they have been without merit. They've called numerous members of people connected to the Trump movement, everyone has given complete information and shown without a shadow of a doubt that there was no collusion between Trump and Russia. They then brought the people from CrowdStrike in. CrowdStrike was the outfit that was essentially hired by the DNC to provide proof of the hacking, that quote unquote, that was claimed by the DNC to testify before Congress to give that information. They provided no information. They pled the fifth. They did not provide any information to Congress. Now, meanwhile, Grassley is using that same purview of Russian collusion to now bring in individuals associated with this investigation that the FBI kept in secret for almost an entire decade. Up until this point, we're looking at about 8 years of investigation. It was closed, it was shut, charges were filed, but nothing was brought against the highest people tied into this. So what's actually going to happen is it looks like the Democrats may have overplayed their hand on this one, and that opening up all of these hearings against Russia and against the Republicans and Trump is now creating a situation where the Senate absolutely has purview to look at the Clintons' ties to Russia and the Russian state to the tune of $145 million. Roger, they can't sweep this under the rug.
You know, the president himself has told me that he has become a great admirer of Senator Chuck Grassley. You know, he is so different than your usual Washington go-along, get along, look the other way U.S. senator, of which there are too many in the Republican caucus. I know the president views Grassley as a man of utmost integrity and extraordinary courage and guts, and that is proving to be the case. I was interested to see if, because this story was first reported by The Hill and then later by Circa News, with excellent coverage by our friend Sean Hannity, whether the mainstream media would then be able to just sweep it under the rug. The fact that NBC Nightly News was forced to cover it, the fact that Senator Grassley has now opened an investigation before the Senate Judiciary Committee, in my opinion, makes it very difficult to perpetuate the cover-up. How do you see it, Jack?
Absolutely, Roger. So now that we're seeing more and more of this investigation unfold, and it's starting to turn in on its head, keep in mind, and I know that you've borne this out, many people have borne this out before, that not a single dollar has been tracked from the Trump campaign all the way back to the annals of the Kremlin and the halls of Vladimir Putin's private dacha over by Sochi, right? Not a single dollar, not a single ruble has been tracked back to Putin from Trump. However, now we have found over $145 million directly tied to the Clinton Foundation and the Russian state. So what they're going to be able to do is tie that very specifically through a series of documents. Now, there's this FBI informant, and we haven't gotten his name yet because, for obvious reasons, he is protecting his identity. He was barred from speaking before Congress by the Obama Justice Department, and apparently he claims he was even, his lawyer claims, I should say, he was even threatened by Barack Obama and the administration because he wanted to go and testify to allow Congress to know what was going on. He felt that there was a cover-up because he says he has provided mountains of evidence of this collusion to the government, but charges were never brought, not even investigations, as far as we know, ever brought against the Clinton Foundation in full. Now that same FBI informant, and this is going to rock Capitol Hill, depending on his testimony, that same informant is now going to speak before Senator Grassley and before the Senate Judiciary Committee. So the left, the Democrats, are incumbent on hoping that they are not going to be able to prove it, but his evidence, if it proves to be true, is going to be quite damning.
Yeah, this sounds to me like real bombshell testimony, which makes it harder and harder for this scandal to go away. It's kind of ironic because the very four men who've been leading the charge with the claim that Donald Trump was somehow colluding, conspiring, or coordinating with the Russians are Robert Mueller, the FBI director, his successor, James Comey, the FBI director, the Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, and U.S. Attorney, now Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. In other words, the four guys who ran the investigation into the effort by the Russians to subvert and affect this decision within the Obama administration via the Clinton money machine are the same four guys investigating the president for his alleged but completely unproven connections to Russia. This is Kafkaesque. This is Alice in Wonderland time. This is so bizarre that it's actually hard to believe. And then yesterday, for the first time, we see some evidence that Jeff Sessions is actually awake. What did you make of that?
I was quite surprised at Sessions yesterday. I was glad, very glad, but it has been a very long time coming. The man has been in his job for 8-9 months at this point, and this is the first we're hearing of it. Now, I can sympathize with the amount of cleaning up that he has to do in the Department of Justice in the wake of Holder and Lynch, and I would love to give him the benefit of the doubt, but to call these charges, now it really seems that this is only being done in response to the bombshell reporting and in response to what's been coming out, that it turns out this is his own deputy, Roger. This is his own administration. This is his own department, in which Robert Mueller is currently drawing a paycheck as special prosecutor. They are now supposedly going to be investigating. And the part that really threw me for a loop is when he said that Rosenstein would not have to recuse himself in the investigation of the investigation, when Rosenstein himself played a part in the original.
Absolutely. Jack Posobiec from the Rebel Media, thanks for joining us here at the War Room. If you can hang in for another segment, I'd love to kick it around with you. In the meantime, folks, massive discounts now at the Infowars.com store. Brain Force, 50% off. Essential Oils Collection, 25% off. Alexa Pure Pro, 20% off. All Emmerich Essentials, 50% off. Get there now. Welcome back. I'm your host, Roger Stone, and you're at the right place. That's right, you're on the War Room here at Infowars.com. Joining me via magic is my friend Jack Posobiec, a inveterate investigative reporter and fellow revolutionary with his pulse on the situation in Washington. Now, when Frederica Wilson was in the Florida legislature, she was considered an eccentric. There are not many women who habitually wear a cowboy hat who are from South Florida and not west of the Mississippi. But now the congresswoman seems to have gotten herself embroiled in a major flap with the President of the United States. Jack, why don't you recap this for us and tell us what exactly General Kelly had to say about it today.
So, Roger, what specifically happened here earlier this week was that she had participated in the funeral for one of the soldiers, one of our special operators, Green Berets, who died in Niger, was killed in Niger fighting the terrorists there. Boko Haram was one of the main area units in that area. And during this time, she said that she was on the phone, or heard President Trump on the phone with the family, or she may have also been on the phone. I'm not sure exactly the logistics of it, but she heard him say a line to them that he knew what he was signing up for, and that she made it sound as if President Trump was belittling the service of this soldier, the service of this Green Beret, and then went to the media and essentially blasted it all over the place, made a huge stink about it, told everybody what was going, that Trump had attacked a Gold Star family, that he was doing this, that he was doing that. It was completely not true. Now, John Kelly gets wrapped up in it as well, because John Kelly's own son, First Lieutenant Robert Kelly, U.S. Marine Corps, was actually himself killed in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, back, I think it was 2010, years ago, and he is buried at Arlington. And so for him, this was a huge moment, and he actually took to the White House press conference today, the actual Brady press room, and delivered an extremely emotional statement, something he had said, look, I never wanted to get involved in this. I never wanted this to be brought up. My son, or any son or any family who had sacrificed, but because this congresswoman was politicizing the entire event, was bringing the fallen soldiers, children of current elected officials or families that are currently grieving, he felt the need to bring it up and delivered a massive statement today, something that was so emotional and gripping, and really criticized Congresswoman Wilson for attacking the president over something like this, saying that this was a sacred phone call and that it should never have been discussed in public to begin with. I understand the father actually reached out and said that in the context that what he was saying was, and I say this as a veteran myself, I hear this from many people who have lost friends, I've lost friends, we say, when we say we know you, what you signed up for, it's because we volunteer to serve our country. We volunteer to serve our fellow men and women of the United States. That's what we're signing up for. So actually, yes, we are signing up for something incredibly sacred, and his service was incredibly sacred as well. And for her to politicize this, it goes, honestly, Roger, beyond the pale of anything I've really seen in politics.
You know, last night, Congresswoman Wilson skipped the North Miami Beach Kiwanis Club, where she was scheduled to speak, claiming that she had skipped it for security concerns. A representative of hers who attended the meeting claimed that this was based on Trump's rhetoric. He didn't call him the president. But I checked with the Broward County Sheriff's Office. I also checked with my sources in the U.S. Secret Service and the Capitol Hill Police. None of them told me or confirmed that there were any death threats against the good Congresswoman. I think she just didn't want to show so she could go off and do media. Leave it to the Democrats to politicize the death of an American service person. If I have any message for Congresswoman Wilson, it is simply this: lose the cowboy hat. For your own good, lose the cowboy hat. Jack Posobiec joining us here on the War Room. I do want to mention to you that tomorrow, thanks to the Southeast Volusia County Republican Club, I will be attending their Trump Fest in New Smyrna Beach. That's tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. It takes place at the Historical Women's Club at 403 Magnolia Street in New Smyrna Beach. Now, my fellow patriot and friend Chris Cox of Bikers for Trump will be speaking, along with Colonel Mike McAllister of Citizens for Trump. Jack, we're going to miss you, but we expect to have a terrific evening. So please, if you are in the area, come on down and say hello. I will be signing copies of my book, The Making of the President 2016. And given her activities, I think I may also be signing copies of the Clinton's War on Women. Jack, thanks for joining us here at the last minute on the War Room. We look forward to having you back.
No problem. Thanks, Roger. Always a pleasure. Have fun tomorrow.
Many thanks. For those of you who missed it in the earlier segment, President George W. Bush gave a speech in New York sponsored by the George W. Bush Institute, and he continued the Russia, Russia, Russia phony neocon narrative. The former president said, and I quote, "Our country must show resolve and resilience in the face of external attacks on our democracy." External attacks, Mr. President? What about the internal attacks? The fact is the deep state and the Clinton-Bush crime syndicate have rolled out George W. Demonstrates exactly how desperate these folks are. Bush goes on to say, and I quote, "America has experienced a sustained attempt by a hostile power to feed and exploit our country's divisions." Actually, no. What we've seen has been a feeble and inept attempt, ham-handed based on everything that I have seen, to somehow use $100,000 worth of Facebook ads to affect an election in which literally millions of people voted. Looks to me like Igor and Boris don't know how American politics works, and they certainly don't know how to function within it. Now, some of you may remember that it was George W. Bush who said, and I quote, after the Trump inauguration, that he went and it was, and I quote, "some weird shit." Well, we find your administration to be some weird shit. You see, you cratered the economy. You lied us into a foreign war in Iraq for which our inherent national interest was never clear.
Millie Weaver reporting for Infowars.com. We're here in Austin, Texas, and we're going to be asking people what they think about the recent Hollywood sex abuse scandals that have been coming out following Harvey Weinstein's sex allegations, where several women came out alleging that Harvey Weinstein, the big Miramax producer, sexually assaulted them. Well, it's also interesting to note that other actresses came out, such as Angelina Jolie, Reese Witherspoon, and even Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan actually came out and said Lisa Bloom, the daughter of the feminist powerhouse attorney Gloria Allred, had actually been trying to silence her for months and had even went so far as to offer millions of dollars to keep silent about Harvey Weinstein's sexual abuses. Well, let's go see what these people in Austin, Texas have to say about this situation. What do you guys think about the recent Hollywood sex scandals?
Not much, really. I don't really know much.
Did you guys hear about a bunch of like celebrities, Angelina Jolie, Gwyneth Paltrow, Rose McGowan?
No,
they all
not very current.
Have you heard about the recent Hollywood sex abuse scandals that have been happening?
No, I haven't.
Where we had Angelina Jolie, a bunch of celebrity women coming out talking about producers abusing them?
No.
You haven't heard of it?
No.
Have you guys heard about the Hollywood sex abuse scandals?
No.
Have you heard about the recent Hollywood sex abuse scandals?
No.
What do you guys think about the recent Hollywood sex abuse scandals? What do you guys think about the recent Hollywood sex abuse scandals, Harvey Weinstein and all that?
We're from Alaska and we don't really watch TV, so I have no clue.
Did you hear about the Hollywood sex abuse scandals?
I have not.
Did you hear about the Hollywood sex abuse scandals?
No, actually, no.
Have you heard about the Hollywood sex abuse scandals?
No, I haven't.
Did you guys hear about the Hollywood sex abuse scandals with the celebrities coming out saying that they were assaulted or sexually abused by producers and directors?
No.
I haven't either.
Not many people in America know about these Hollywood sex abuse allegations, despite the fact that we have celebrity women coming out making these allegations. For instance, Rose McGowan was even temporarily suspended from Twitter after coming out against Harvey Weinstein. We had stories of past cover-ups, media outlets, and news outlets actually having advance notice of Harvey Weinstein's bad behavior and covering it up years ago. So it's no wonder that we have such a silence, a deafening silence from the mainstream media when these celebrity women are coming out making these allegations. It appears that they don't want this light shown on the Hollywood swamp. Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, well, yeah.
Harvey Weinstein, the big Miramax producer.
The producer guy, yes, I've heard about. It was like quite a bit of people, actually, that they were saying they got sexual abuse, yeah.
Oh, yes, the Weinstein account. Yes, I've heard about that. Can you share some information?
Okay, so Harvey Weinstein, who's a co-founder, producer of Miramax, the production studio, a bunch of women have come out saying that he raped them, sexually abused them. So you heard about that?
Yes, a little bit.
Did you guys also hear about Reese Witherspoon? She came out?
No, I did not hear about that.
She came out and said that when she was 16, she was sexually assaulted by a director.
It's just awful because I know a lot of the actresses, like some of them were kind of more upcoming actresses, and they said that it discouraged them from acting. So that's just such an unfortunate, awful thing, and it makes you wonder like how many other people of authority in that industry are doing the same thing.
In order to cover something up, it means that you feel as though your career would be in jeopardy if you were to bring it to light.
Yeah, now that you're talking, I suddenly remembered on Facebook this morning, I saw a friend of mine coming out telling about several incidents she has had in her life. Maybe that was because of that. Just that I've been on vacation, so I didn't follow the news. So maybe something happens when people come out and tell about it, and then others do, and so we get more aware of the problem.
Us at InfoWars, we had been reporting that this sex abuse scandals in Hollywood have been going on and people had been being quiet about it, and finally now it's coming out.
I think it's just them not doing their job. It's obviously a huge story and it should have been covered sooner.
What do you think about how you have these women who are helping these predators, claiming that they're for women, that they're feminists?
I don't really understand that at all. I don't understand why she would be pushing her, like pressuring her to not say anything. I think that kind of disgusts me. I would understand the women that didn't speak about it, like the ones who were harassed who didn't speak about it, because I think a lot of times when women try to report sexual harassment and rape and stuff like that, it's often suppressed, so it's not usually taken seriously.
It seem as though it's the woman's fault.
Yes, yeah.
You're probably asking the wrong person, because I would like to castrate him and send him off.
But do you think that women should be supported more for speaking out?
Yes, definitely.
What do you think? Is it surprising that this kind of behavior would be going on in Hollywood?
Absolutely not. It's been permitted for years, and it's about time somebody was able to nip it in the bud and stop it.
I'd probably not say that I was completely surprised, but I honestly don't think that it's should be accepted in any way. I think Hollywood's, of course, got a lot of beautiful women, but they should also be respected. And I don't think any man ever has a right to be inappropriate with a female.
It's one of those circles that you just, it's like everybody knows but nobody tells kind of thing. Honestly, I think that's like people that like everybody kind of knows that, you know, there's this kind of circle that it's like a mafia almost. I don't think it's right, obviously.
I think it's been going on for a long time, and it's taken way too long for it to come to light now. I think that all these women have the right to speak for themselves, and I think that it's been a long time coming. So, I mean, I'm happy that it's finally coming to light now.
Where did you hear about the Weinstein sexual assaults? Was it social media?
Yeah, usually or people.com. I'm on that a lot, if not dailymail.com.
Have you seen any mainstream media, television, news sites covering it?
I haven't.
Do you think the mainstream media is kind of lacking here?
I think so, because I honestly hadn't heard much about it before you approached me. I heard about like a few of the actresses and then Angelina Jolie reporting it, but I only read one article on it. I really haven't seen as much as I probably should be.
All right, there you have it. Thank you, Millie Weaver, for a terrific piece from the streets of Austin. In our next segment, Leanne McAdoo is going to bring us up to date on the Russian collusion delusion and the latest on that. I've been carefully watching the state of Michigan, and I am increasingly excited about the prospects for rock legend Kid Rock to seize a U.S. Senate seat in the name of reform. Kid Rock, like Donald Trump, comes from a discipline outside of politics. He's made his living in entertainment, and if you listen to him, you know he's a born rocker. Now, the latest is that Eminem, a man of the left, may decide to jump into this race. Well, my money is with Kid Rock. I think that properly managed, properly handled, and properly funded, he could go all the way. Now, Ronald Reagan, George Murphy, they came from the world of entertainment to the world of politics, as did Arnold Schwarzenegger, whereas Donald Trump came from the world of business. Folks, keep an eye on Kid Rock. I think he could go all the way. Again, we'll be back with Leanne McAdoo and a special report on the Russian collusion delusion. You're here on The War Room. Welcome back. You're at The War Room, and I'm your host, Roger Stone. Our technicians tell me that we won't be able to bring you that anticipated special report from Leanne McAdoo. We will bring it up another time. But in the meantime, I want to revisit the situation in Las Vegas. You see, citizen journalists and eyewitnesses to the Las Vegas massacre on October 1st have been using the power of the internet to share their stories with each other, even as the bigger social networks move on in overdrive to try to censor them. One would expect, especially given the considerable resources assigned to the case, that as time progressed, we would be learning more about exactly what happened. Sadly, this has not been the case. Narrative after narrative have been proffered, and one by one they are poked full of holes by video, audio, and eyewitness accounts captured on the scene. When the mainstream media and their handlers realize their narrative is shredded in tatters, all they do is roll out yet another one, attempting to dive into the variety of media-generated raw image, video, and audio captured on the scene, as well as the outpouring of personal accounts recorded later, reveals how deeply ingrained this rabbit hole goes. One red flag after another has been raised by the drive-by media. They quickly are glossed over and ignored. Today we're going to talk about guns and money. Almost immediately after the shooting, Eric Paddock, the brother attributed to lone wolf Stephen Paddock, told the Washington Post that his brother only owned 5 guns, didn't hunt, and rarely shot his weapons. According to law enforcement reports released the day after the incident, some 23 guns were found in Paddock's Mandalay Bay suite, some of which had been converted, as we now know, to be fully automatic. It turns out that Eric didn't know his brother very well because in just the last year, Stephen Paddock had purchased at least 33 firearms in the one-year period from October 2016 until the actual day of the shootings. We say at least 33 because ATF, the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms within the U.S. Justice Department, had only searched the records of Nevada, Utah, California, and Texas to try to get hip to Stephen Paddock's gun purchasing productivities. If Paddock had done mass purchases of weapons in other states, well, we might easily have missed those firearms acquisitions. It's curious that New Mexico and Florida were not included in the list of states recorded by the search, being as Paddock lived in both of them previously. Both states have fairly open and constitutionally based gun laws. When they searched his home in Mesquite, Nevada, authorities claimed to have found at least 19 additional guns. Initial reports said that Paddock had used an AK-47 rifle that appeared to be fully automatic when found on the scene. It was unknown if the weapon was of military grade, had built-in auto fire, or whether it had been modified. This weapon, while initially spoken about by law enforcement representatives and the news media, was not shown in any of the leaked photos of the Mandalay Bay suite. Later reports attributed the automatic nature of machine gun fire as coming from bump stocks, which are also called a slide fire stock, that were attached to at least some of Paddock's guns. Images of the inside of the shooter's hotel room at the Mandalay Bay were released by an anonymous source, not the Las Vegas Police Department, and they showed several different rifles, a number of which did appear to have so-called bump stocks. What is notable, however, is the fact that some of them did not. While not specifically related to the guns, while mentioning the pictures from inside the shooter's Mandalay Bay suite, it's important to note the image of the shooter himself, who appeared to be shot in the head and lying in a pool of his own blood. A clean and shiny rifle casing is sitting on top of the pool of blood by his head. Did the photographer place it there? Someone must have put the casing there because Stephen could not have fired his rifle in such a way to have the casing land on top of the pooled blood from his own mortal head wound, which of course he wouldn't have at the time that he had shot the gun at himself. Therefore, someone had to place the casing where it was. While Eric's brother claimed that Stephen was just an accountant, records show that he worked at Lockheed Martin and NASA and had a security clearance. A clearance is required for much of the work performed in both of those defense industry locations. Paddock was considered a loner with a long line of federal government jobs. He was listed as a U.S. Postal Service letter carrier in the mid-1970s, and then records show that he worked for the Internal Revenue Service from 1978 to 1984. From the IRS, he got a quote-unquote promotion to work at the Department of Defense at the Defense Contract Audit Agency until 1985, when he went to work for one of the defense contracting companies he ostensibly was in charge of auditing. 3 years later, this defense contractor merged with Lockheed Martin. Several sources, including internal newsletters from the 1980s, apparently show that at the same time Stephen was collecting a paycheck from the U.S. Postal Service, he was also arranging bowling tournaments for NASA. NASA, theoretically an agency that he did not work for. Multiple mainstream reports show that Paddock graduated from California State at Northridge in the 1970s. Cal State Northridge features a strong recruitment and funding link to NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory going back decades. Graduating from Cal State Northridge, then going to a mail carrier, and finally working at the IRS hardly seems like a fitting resume for somebody who was then given a top job as a senior investigator at the Department of Defense's Defense Audit Agency. The DCAA is where the wheels hit the pavement for uncovering or covering up military industrial scale graft. The right guy for a DCAA job can take the heat off or prepare the way for billions of dollars of overcharges and outright theft of the American taxpayer's dollar. So Paddock's work history from 1988 to the current time is somewhat unclear. But by 2004, he was buying entire apartment complexes, netting himself millions of dollars in profits. By 2017, Stephen Paddock was telling almost anybody who would listen that he was a high-stakes gambler who gambled over $1 million a year at the tables of Las Vegas. This, it just so happens, is the perfect cover for a small-scale money launderer, and it worked for Walter White, after all. Stephen also liked to travel, but his choices of travel destinations tended towards the conflicted. There was some political turmoil someplace. It seems like Stephen Paddock would show up. Now, it's not easy to see why some researchers think that Stephen Paddock was not some accountant run amok, but rather a lifelong operative and employee of the deep state. I am proud to say that no media outlet has led where Infowars.com has led on this important issue. We still don't have the truth about what happened in Las Vegas, but we here at Infowars will not get distracted. We will not move on to the next story. We intend to stay on this one until we get what Alex Jones demands: the truth and nothing but the truth. You're here on The War Room. I want to remind you, stop by the Infowars.com store to give us the help we need. You are the cutting edge.